Good morning to the parishioners of St. Andrews. I'd like to start this morning off with a prayer. So you please bow your heads. God Almighty, please protect us this morning as we start this day. We all feel a little closer to you this day as we are in the attic of one of your houses of worship. Our purpose is to prepare this video so we can show you, the parishioners, the reason that we should keep this historic landmark a place that will stand for another century. The men that built this building were true craftsmen, and we understand that preserving their creation and yours will be done only by your graces. Amen. So what we're doing today is a little tour of the attic of the church, and to my right is Tim Winters from Dominion Traditional Group. He was one of the masonry experts that we used during the steeples. So hopefully with what I have seen over the years and with what Tim and I will talk about this morning, it's why we have to undertake this preservation effort. So what we're doing right now is we're standing in the bottom of the steeple, and if you will scan up, you will see the or the bottom of the steeple. So this is where we have to begin as we come down. All right, so now we're entering into the attic. Okay, so where I'm standing is pretty much over the front doors of the church, and this would be the back wall where we are here. And what I want to point to you in relation to the roof is where we found most of the termite damage that led up into the steeples. So you can see the rotten wood that adjoins the building. This was an open hole, and this was an open hole, but they've been sealed during the steeple project. So everything from this point on backward, from here and all the way down to the steeples, even the damage that's right there, has all been corrected. That you can see the evidence of where the leaks were into the entrance of the church, into the front. But so this envelope has really been sealed from this point on. So where I'm going from here is the back. My back is pointing toward the south, which is the front of the church, and I'll be heading down the attic toward the north. I'll be heading toward the chapel. So on the east wall of the building, I just want you to look, if he can zoom in on, you can see the evidence of a right many nails in this area right here, especially some extreme long nails. These are old patches over the years. There's old water stains there, but if you just come straight up, the reason I'm doing that is to show you the lack of nails, and that's the reason that this caulking issue around the slates has caused us to replace the roof. Those nails are gone, or they weren't penetrating enough when they put them on. So that's why in 1975 they went back there and caulked the slate, thinking that would help it. But that's another issue that I'm sure we'll talk about a little bit later on. So we're going to head right on back. When you get a little orientation here, you'll see where we're going to eventually end up in the video is down here on the lower parts, and we'll be getting close to the masonry. But for right now, we're just going to head right straight back toward the north, or toward the altar. People should be amazed, and what I'm amazed at is how these guys got the size of these beams up here in the attic. And if you'll look at my hand, you'll see how big they are in width and girth, and how they're actually supported into the building. So this building can carry a tremendous load, but I'm always amazed at how they got these things up here. With today's cranes, I'm not sure that we could even reproduce how they did that. Okay, I want to give you another relationship where I'm at, and I'm right underneath of the back steeple. And this is a steeple that we did not address during the steeple project. Doesn't sound right though, but we couldn't reach it. So anyway, it's a wooden structure that's tied into the building, but shows no real internal damage other than the external damage from old copper and ornaments that's in and around it. So now you've got a little orientation to where it is, and I believe I see an old birdhouse. Okay, where I am now in some orientation is, for you all, is I'm right above where the Advent wreath comes down. This is where we electrically let the Advent wreath down, which is just pretty much up underneath of the steeple. But to give you some idea, and we really don't have to walk back here, but this would be where the altar is. This would be the nave area above the altar, and the exterior wall that goes around it. But we're going to now really basically jump over into the masonry issues, and we'll be running off of the wings, which will be the east and the west wall of the church. So now we're on in orientation right above the Jefferson Street entrance, and above the vestibule. So we're going to start talking about the masonry issues of what's going on. I'm going to turn this part of it over to Tim.
In our previous work, the last time we were here about 4 years ago, part of the work that we did was to reset or reseal the capstones that were above the walls. And if you take a look at this wall, you'll see signs in the right light, really, of where moisture, water has penetrated in. You'll see some of the streaking down the sides of the walls, which has certainly contributed to some of the staining and degradation that you see at the interior of the church. So it's part of the scope of the work that has been proposed here would be to make sure that the top stone pieces have all been set if they need to be reset. There were some previously that were loose. Make sure that the mortar beneath them is solid, and make sure that there's no area at all for that water to penetrate down through the wall from the top surfaces. That's right.
All right.
And what you'll notice is that there has been water penetrating through this wall. And with a lime-based mortar, which this church was constructed of, water will basically wear down the lime slowly and surely so that you get a seepage that you can see on the wall. So it's pretty imperative that you want to make sure that all your exterior surfaces, are closed in tight, everything is sealed up, and that you don't end up with the degradation of the mortar. Because over time, this particular piece here, you've got very solid, very hard brick, but lime does break down over time if moisture and water is allowed to continually hit it like it is shown here.
Okay, so now where we are is on the east wall, which would be about where you enter the church from the commons area. So we basically have the same thing going on both walls, but Tim, that all looks the same, doesn't it?
It sure does. It shows that sign of water infiltration. And one of the things, that it's very easy to see when you're sitting down, in the church and you look up, you can certainly see some staining, or you see the efflorescence. And really, efflorescence tells you that you have water migrating through your wall. You have that penetration. And really what it's doing is it's saturating that masonry to a point at which it's starting to drive the salts out. So that tells you right off the bat that you have a water infiltration problem.
Okay, where we are now, we're still on the east wall, but we're down in the lowest part of the attic to where we can actually inspect the sill plates. And the sill plates is what all these heavy beams are attached to in the roof. And as we're talking about efflorescence, there's not as much on these walls as the ones that we showed you previously, but I'm going to go back a little bit out from masonry and go back to slate, because now we're really close to these boards that I told you that don't have nails. You can see nails that have been on old patchworks, which are just old long 16 galvanized nails. They're not even copper nails. So there's still no evidence of them ever penetrating this wood with a slate. We're talking about something that's 125 years ago. So the proper way for a slate nail is to penetrate the board, and it's not there. That's why we don't see a lot of evidence. That's why they didn't stay as long as they should. So what I'll do is follow you down to the seal plate. Now the seal plate is what actually holds this roof to the masonry. So if we don't address the masonry issues now, and the masonry starts to crumble in the butter joints, am I correct?
That's correct.
If they start to collapse over more time, these seal plates will deteriorate. Then that's when you have catastrophic failure, when your roof will collapse. But I'm not trying to be Debbie Downer on this thing, but every year we wait for this to get this effervescence and moisture to increase is when the seal plates will become saturated and rotting, and then everything, it goes south from there. So we have some seal plate damage, but it's back where the termites were when we first started this video. So we're at the lowest point we can get, and it's the same on the west side as the east side, so it's kind of redundant to move over there because it's hot up here. Said we were leaving. I said we were leaving, but I'm not. I want to show you just an area that we had the last leak in the church, and it was somewhere in this area here. I'm not moving back over there just to show you, but we had to get a crane in here because it's not accessible from being on the east side, since the patio and the parish center is there. So to get that fixed, where I was going with this, if you just think the leak was right there, if you look down at this church ceiling, and this is the little lights that are in those little alicos all back and through the church, but that is a plaster mix, a very soft mix of plaster, and could possibly even have some lime in it. It really hasn't been determined. It's definitely not asbestos, but that is so soft that the first little drip that you get in this church will actually penetrate it within minutes. So you can, if you have a catastrophic leak up here, it transfers into the church almost immediately. Okay, as we leave the attic this morning, the only thing else I think you would maybe like to know is, this is where the termites infested the east steeple. And those little gray tracks, if you can see them, are where the termites go back to ground. So they go all the way down, and that's how they fed themselves up and back through this damage and into the up into the steeple. But we check this, or I check this at least twice a year, and we were very successful at finding the colony which lived in the steeple. So everything I've showed this morning, the church is stable interior. There's no termite damage. There is old water damage. That's what we talked about this morning. But as we exit the steeple this morning, I'd like to thank Mike Poff for helping us out with this video this morning. I want to thank you, Tim, for making that 3-hour trip this morning.
Anytime, Wayne.
And as again, Tim is with Dominion Traditional Group out of Warrenton, Virginia. He is possibly going to be the subcontractor again for Durable in this project, and we look forward to him sharpening his pencil and making this all happen. Okay, we found ourselves back into the church here at the final conclusion of this video, and it's definitely much cooler down here than it was up there. But one thing I wanted to show you, we're now standing at the Jefferson Street vestibule, and if you'll remember, we were showing you the effervescence on the wall. Well, it's very close. He's going to scan up to the top here. This is at the entrance to where you go into the altar sacristy. But if you'll look there and to the right, you're going to see that moisture entering the church, and that is a very close proximity to the wall, and that's where we were standing. That's what we were saying. The closer you are to the wall, the more evidence of this moisture wicking that's coming in. And you know, that really happens more in the winter than it does the summer, because it's colder outside, warmer inside, of course, and the water won't migrate to cold, it'll migrate to warm. So this is going on all the time, but it's more prevalent when the weather is like that, and when the humidity is extremely high. By no means I'm an expert on this, but I can go back to something that my grandfather told me when I was younger, and it was relating to a house, and I think it's a good thing to close with this morning. You know, when you have a hole that big, and you move off to another place like we did up in the church, and we showed you that we have another hole like this and another hole like this and multiple holes. Well, think about that hole times 10 is this. Think about the ones that I showed you this morning that were like this. And so how big is the hole? The whole envelope of the church is compromised by nothing but water, time, and age. And thank you again.